Aloha hula, sapai.
Aloha kako! I'm Kimo Alama Keaulana, and welcome to Ho'onanea, my home here in Nanakuli Homestead. And I'm so glad that you came to join me. And I want to talk story with you about the ipu. I've always had a fascination with ipus. There are many, many, many different kinds of varieties of ipu that were grown in traditional days of old Hawaii. Uh, I think my fascination with ipu first started with this ipu here that I'm holding in my hands. This is the kind of ipu we call a Hawai'i. It is an ipu that was grown specifically for holding water in. This particular ipu was found when I was about, I think 16 years old, when Dr. Mitchell took me to Ho'onaunau. We went to the Pu'uhonua o Ho'onaunau, and I found this ipu on the ground, and it still had seeds in it, and I took it home. And one day, Auntie Alice Namakelua had called me, as she often did, and I told her that I found this ipu in Ho'onaunau. Auntie Alice told me that when she was a little girl, they used to grow ipu at Honoka'a, where she was born and raised. Now, she was born in 1895. So when she was a little girl, this is going to be about, 1900? And she told me how to plant the ipu. Now, it takes a lot of work to plant ipu and to grow ipu. Ipu were not gathered and harvested in the wilds in old Hawaii. You had to plant them and grow them. You had to make all of these trellises, sturdy trellises, so that the ipu vines could grow. And Auntie Alice said you got kane ipu seeds and you got wahine ipu seeds. You have to plant as many as you can to make sure you get kane and ipu seeds. And you got to give it a lot of water. Now, she said, you have to watch the flowers. Because when it comes about ahi time, or just before late afternoon, that's when the flowers are going to bloom. She says, you look, the wahine in the middle is pehu, kind of swollen. The kane have the ehu, the pollen. You have to pollinate it yourself. And so I followed the directions like Auntie Alice told me, and lo and behold, those ipu vines grew fast. And I did pollinate them by hand, and I was so surprised at how fast those ipu took. The first day after pollination, they're about the size of a pea, and every day they're going to get bigger and bigger. So it's going to be the size of a pea, then a dime, a nickel, and they get bigger and bigger. But the only thing with ipu, and this is what Auntie Alice said, she was right, if it touches anything, it's going to take on that shape of whatever it touches. I remember Kumu Keahi, Sarah Keahi. Her mother, Mrs. Helen Smythe, she was a court dancer for Princess Kavanana Court. She grew the Ipu Nui variety of ipus, the large ipu. I'm going to share with you one. And where she wanted the neck of the ipu to be, that's where she tied a rag around it. And as that ipu grew, it did not grow where the rag was tied around it. So that became the neck of the ipu. So it kind of ballooned out to the top, the heke, and the olo, the bottom. So ipu, you have to watch it very, very carefully when they're growing. And if the hua, the fruit, touches the ground, you have to huli or rotate it. But by it's going to get all palahe underneath, rotten, where it touches the ground. So it's a very, very, very tricky plant to grow. And then after it reaches its maturity, you have to let that vine completely die and dry, and let the ipu dry. And this could take years. And I have not only this Hawai'i here, but I also have this ipu here. This ipu is about at least 200 years old, if not older. And this, like the Hawai'i, is a Hawaiian variety of ipu. What we see today is not a Hawaiian variety of ipu because we can't grow them in Hawaii because there is a bug that will sting the fruit and the ipu will not mature. You can tell it's a Hawaiian variety because of the thinness of the walls. You can see it's quite thinner than the varieties we get today from the North American continent. And also you can tell by the color. This is the natural color of the ipu. It's more brown, huh, than the lighter colors that we get today. This kind of ipu in old Hawaii, they would usually store food inside. And these were the cords that they would use to hang up above this pole, right, right below the ceiling, so that animals or children could not get into the food. Now this ipu was given to me. This belonged to an old Kumu Hula enchanter. For those of you who know your Kumu Hula and enchanting history of people, you would recognize the name of Mr. Manuel Silva. Mr. Manuel Silva owned this ipu and this one. Okay, now I believe this ipu was also originally a kind of Hawai'i because of its opening here. They would put a stone or a shell inside here after they filled it with water. But I think what Mr. Silva wanted to do was to connect these two ipu to make a ipoheke like this. This bottom being the olo, and this top gourd being the heke. Now, wouldn't that make a beautiful ipoheke? And I was told that I should do it. But because these ipu are so very, very old, and I think I would rather keep them in their original state because I have a ipoheke, and I'll show it to you later on. So these are very old. This ipu belonged to my hula teacher. You know, one of the most beautiful things I think that happened in my lifetime is when I had inherited these things and even things from my own hula teacher. You know, they would hand down these pieces of precious things that they loved, and also these beautiful things like their mele book. This mele book belonged to Mrs. Emma Fern. She was the teacher of Manuel Silva. And Emma Fern was the very first hula teacher for Mrs. Kavena Pukui. And so, you know, they kept their meles in these old books, and the books are falling apart, but I just wanted to show you, you know, just a little bit of how Hawaiians have kept mele before in the old days. And that they would pass them on to their maybe their favorite pupil, or their pupil that showed the most promise, or the ones that would hand down in all faith, you know, the meles and the hulas. And so I'm handing these things down to you about the ipus and other implements. This ipu belonged to Adeline Lee. One time I showed it to Auntie Pat Bacon. Auntie Pat was my neighbor. And every so often we would get together. And I said, oh, Auntie Pat, this ipu belonged to Adeline Lee, because she knew Adeline Lee quite well. So Auntie Pat looked at it and she put her hand in it. Well, I won't put my hand in it because Auntie Pat's hand was smaller. And I was wondering, gee, was she putting, oh no, I can't put that. I said, I wonder why she's putting her hand in the ipu. And then she slipped her hand out. And then I had the nerve to ask her, why did you put your hand inside the ipu? And she told me this. I wanted to see if it was a Hawaiian ipu. And she said, it is. So I asked her, how could you tell? And she said again, the walls of the Hawaiian variety are thinner, but they're tougher. And the color is different from the ipus that we get today. Okay, now this is another use of ipu, and as I explained, in the old Hawaiian hale, you would put belongings or things in here and suspend these from the ceiling. Now this is not a Hawaiian variety of ipu, because you can tell again, the color is lighter. And the walls are thicker. You see that? A little bit thicker. And the walls are are soft, a little bit softer than the Hawaiian varieties that used to be grown. And I want to share with you my ipoheke here. In the old days, they would take two gourds like this, fit them together, and join them together. And how they would join them was they would poke holes in the gourds and they would sew them together. And then they would plug up the holes and the seam between the two ipus with sap from the ulu. The ulu acted like sort of like a caulking material. And the old ipu did not have a kaula or an attachment for your hands around the neck. They would actually put two holes in the side of the ipu, but not put it over here by the neck. But today we tie it around the neck. Now this part of the ipu, the top is called the heke. Just like the uli uri, the top part is the heke, and this bottom part is the olo. Now, the ipoheke, this top gourd acts as a sound chamber to resonate when you do the ooh or the downbeat. And so it will give you this nice kind of boom kind of sound. This top part, the heke, you never beat on it. I was told that when you look at ipoheke, it is the shape of a human body. Hawaiians never hit the head of a human being because this part here where your shoulders are, that's where the akua come. Your guardian spirits come and hover around you. And so if you strike somebody in their head, you might be striking a good spirit. So even with the ipoheke, we don't strike the head part. We use the olo gourd down here to strike. There's another part of the ipu we never hit, and it's this part here, the piko. This piko part of the ipu is like the soft spot on the baby's head, the manawa. And so you would never want to hit the soft spot in the ipu. You could shatter your ipu by hitting this part. So here we don't hit. You can hit on the circumference, but not over here. And the heke you don't hit either. Now the chanting was always done in a seated position, and I was always taught if you are going to be doing chanting, you fold your legs under you, because your vavai, the under part of your feet that touches the ground, that's the dirty part of your body. So you don't want to sit with your legs facing front. You either want to sit with your legs contained this way or seated folded under you, like how you do in the other hula noho. Now, I was taught, this is the Ilal Ole school of hula. Your hand goes down inside, and then you're going to vili your hands to come around the wrist this way. And so now, that's how you're going to keep the ipu nice and sturdy here. And this is called the u beat. The down beat is u. And when you put your hands to the side of the olo, this is called the te. Just like that. And you don't hit it like this now. You want to be very soft and flexible. See, different other sound. That's what you want right here. And so this is an u and a te. And just to make it a little bit fancy, we add a ka'eke loloi, a little bit ornamentation with our hands. Just like that. Now that name of the pa'i, the beat I'm doing for you now is called the kahela. It's the kahela beat. The single beat is called the pa beat, just one u and one te. Then we have a beat called the ku, and it sounds like this, 3 u's and 2 te's. And basically with only these 3 beats, that's how we create all of our accompaniment for the hula pa ipu. The hula pa'a ipu are those dances when you have the dancers standing up and dancing, and the ho'opa'a, or the drummer, the chanter, is going to beat the ipu to keep cadence to the vavai, the feet. But when we dance with the ipu as a partner, as a dancing implement, we are always going to be seated. The idea of standing up and dancing with the ipu doesn't come until the maybe about the 1940s, 1930s, 1940s, with Mama Emma Bishop. She loved the ipu. She always carried an ipu everywhere she went. Even when she sang and performed, she would pa'i the ipu. She was the one that did the ipu as a standing dance. Now, sometimes doing the hula with the ipu seated is called the hula noho pa'i ipu. Sometimes it's called the hula noho kuolo or the hula kuolo. But it's only called a kuolo if you have this movement in the dance, a kuolo movement. Then you can call it a hula kuolo. Other than that, it's a hula noho pa'ipu or hula noho pa'i ipu. And I'd like to demonstrate how the ipu is used as a dancing partner and as an implement in the hula pa'i ipu. And this hula is going to take us to Kauai. Now it's interesting that on Kauai, what we call the hula pa'ipu, with the standing dancing and the ho'opa'a, on Kauai they call that the hula ipu wai. But this is a hula noho pa'ipu from Kauai. Keaulana Kauai kamali kamali no ke kai helai kalahai helai kalahai helai kalahai ho'owipo wipo wana me ka nahaulu me ka ua ke vai nelei ke kino nelei ke kino nelei ke kino pulelo e ke oholo ke lahuli kapalai Moianu, ke kuahivi, ke kuahivi, ke kuahivi. Haina ia mai ana kapuana, kaulana kauai. Kamalihi, kamahalihi, kamahalihi. He mele no kauai.
Welcome to our Pasifika, powered by the world's largest Polynesian dance store, Aloha Hula Supply. Become a member to enjoy video content, monthly specials, quarterly giveaways, and discounts on premium workshops. Together, let's learn, share, teach, and grow as we uplift our cultures and support each other. Mahalo!